Bam. All right, here we go. Awesome. Well, welcome to the December 15th, 2:32 p.m. Site-Based Decision-Making Council regularly scheduled meeting for Atherton High School. If you sent the agendas electronically, but if you need access to that, if you want to raise your hand or something, I can put it in the chat. Okay, so then let's go ahead and it's a call to order at 2:32, and I want to go ahead and welcome Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, you want to unmute and introduce yourself as our newly elected parent representative?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's nice to join you. I have 2 sons at Atherton. I'm a longtime JCPS parent, lived in Louisville since 2003. I think the other lawyer on the group said, why in the world would we have 2 lawyers on one council? I guess we'll find out. So bear with me, and I look forward to getting to know everybody.
All right. Thank you. Congratulations, and appreciate you being part of this leadership group. Just for the record, I guess I'm going to go ahead and throw the agenda in the chat so that if anybody needs to reference it, they can. Within the agenda, I've been hyperlinking all the documents at the points that we would be using them. So if you're having trouble accessing anything, just raise your hand or bring it to my attention, and we'll make sure to get you whatever you need. Approval of SBDM minutes. If you want to spend a few minutes looking at the minutes from last month, November. I'm just looking at it real quick. We talked about the new Kentucky Open Records and Open Meetings documents that everyone, including Mr. Davis, has already signed off on a proof of receipt, so we're good to go. I'll delete that off future agendas, but I just kept that on there as a confirmation that everything was done well. We've already discussed annual training. It looks like everyone's up to date and or scheduled, so including Mr. Davis. So I'm glad everything's been arranged. Last in November, we did the official annual school budget needs assessment, a comprehensive look overall at our finances. This month, we've barely spent hardly any money in the last month with the Thanksgiving break in there and as we continue in NTI. So today's financial update is going to be very short. And then we moved into a couple policies, and I think we kind of stumbled and we wanted to see what the district templates were, as well as get some confirmation. So I followed up with my part of that, and we'll finish talking about, we'll readdress those policies 602 and 603 in this meeting. So that's my quickie version of what we discussed in the last meeting. Anybody want to add to that, subtract, or question anything from the minutes? Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Second.
We have a consensus. Anybody have a problem with a consensus? Then we have consensus. Motion, seconded, and consensus. Racial equity analysis protocol. Mr. Reinhardt, I believe you read last month. So Ms. Slusher, I see you on the agenda. Are you okay to read our racial equity assessment protocols?
It's going to be a little high pitched, but I can do it.
No, you can pass if you'd like.
It's okay.
Okay.
It doesn't bother me. You will just have to listen to it. Number 1, what is the overarching purpose of the policy, procedure, or practice? Number 2, which racial, gender, or other groups could be inequitably affected by this policy, procedure, or practice, and how? Number 3, which racial, gender, or other groups will have the most concerns with this policy, procedure, or practice, and why? Number 4, what unintended consequences could result from the policy, procedure, or practice, such as racial or gender inequities? Number 5, have stakeholders, particularly those most impacted by this decision, been meaningfully informed or involved in the discussion of the policy, procedure, or practice? What was the feedback? Number 6, what factors may be producing and perpetuating inequities associated with this issue? Does this policy, procedure, or practice deepen these inequities or improve them? Number 7, is the policy, procedure, or practice resourced to guarantee full implementation and monitoring? And number 8, who, such as an individual or group, is the main driver for improving equity for this particular policy, procedure, or practice?
Great, thank you very much. And you know, when we keep these things in mind, I think it stimulates us to ask the right questions and ask different questions than we have before. I can already tell you, and I'll get to it, but it just in our last meeting, some of our our invited students, or technically you're not representatives till we get KD approval, but our invited students asked some good questions on things we were talking about with regards to money that put me into a spiral of doing hours of research and some data analysis that we'll be talking about maybe a little bit today, but mainly in January, on how our resource allocations are they equitably reaching all students. I'm the only one in the building right now, so I'm gonna have to answer the door occasionally, and this is one of those occasions. If you give me 30 seconds, I apologize. Sorry about that. So we read the racial equity analysis protocol. Individuals wishing to address the council. Is there anybody who wishes to step into that role? We have some invited guests, so that's different. Okay, none. Just real quick, SBDM training update. I already mentioned that everyone has completed the proof of receipt, which is item 5B. So we're good to go there. And I've also mentioned that everyone has either completed or is signed up for the training, which is item 5A and then 5B. So we're good there. Sorry, I'll be right back. And we're back. Ms. Chancellor, it's your floor. Ms. Chancellor's our comprehensive school improvement plan organizer and facilitator, and she's going to give us a report on that, and that is hyperlinked in the agenda. If you want to pull that up.
Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with this CSIP, it's an annual document that we create that shows what our goals are for for different areas. So, reading improvement, math improvement, achievement gap, graduation, college and career readiness, just what our data is what we want it to look like, what our goals are, and then what our plan is to move towards those goals. So this year, since we are in an NTI environment, we took the CSIP and updated the goals with the data, and then just added some NTI strategies in there. So what I do is we share this with the departments, with English, math, because they are the main ones that work with this, and then with the academy coach, because there's some funding issues in here. So we just updated this and made sure that it hit with our new target dates or target goals that we were given, and updated it for NTI.
So I just pulled one up here. I think everyone sees it. Like the very first one is just by the end of next school, this is 2022, 2023. So do we set 3-year goals? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so your big goal right there is going to be your long-term goal, which is a 3-year goal. And then your objectives are our short-term goals, so our goal for this year. So, and we're given these delivery targets. So yeah, and then those are just the strategies we're going to do, and then the activities, how we're going to measure it, and how often we're monitoring the progress. So it's a pretty cumbersome document. There, are some redundancies in here because some areas will be using the same type of action plans and monitoring, but you can go through here and see, exactly where we're trying to go, how we're going to get there. And it is fluid. There's things that will adjust in the middle of the year if we see things that aren't working. And obviously we've had adjustments this year because of NTI.
I don't know how much you all are interested in digging into it any further. If you review it and you have questions about particular strategies we're using, Ms. Chancellor would be a great contact, and she can connect you with our department leads if it's specific to English or math or particular strategies we're using. This is kind of a framework for things that we're doing in our building, and it's our way of showcasing, I would say, for given our school being as doing as well as it is in so many areas, it's showcasing things that we're doing well, and it's also specifying things that we wish to improve upon and how to improve academic areas that we know need more attention.
And one thing, if you'll notice, if you do look at it more closely, we didn't change everything over to NTI. We did add some NTI components because if we go back to in-person school, we wanted to make sure that we still had those in-person school structures in place.
Comfortable pause there? Anybody? Don't feel like it's necessary, but I want to give the opportunity. I think this ties in well with when we think about what we're doing to address the success of all students. This ties in well with our next presenters, Ms. Campbell and Ms. Marables, who are a counselor and our youth service coordinator, who work with our Aspire Higher group of students. And I hope that will also kind of, as we think about how things that we're doing intentionally, structurally within the school to support all students. We have Mr. Stevens, who will also be presenting. So Ms. Marables or Ms. Campbell?
We agreed as to the presentation, how we'll go. And so Ms. Campbell's going to actually start with the group. But let me just tell you, I appreciate everyone here. Ms. Swanson is also very integral part of the Aspire Higher, and 2 of my students who are involved in Aspire Higher here too. So I just appreciate that. But I'll let Ms. Campbell begin.
Thank you, Ms. Marables. And interestingly enough, Damon Duval, who is here, started our Aspire Higher meeting that we're talking about from November, and Damon, as the BSU president had done a presentation with our teachers, and we had quite a few of our teachers show up, and so he presented the same slides to the Aspire Higher group and then opened the floor for discussion. And a lot of the conversations that came out of his presentation are also things that we've talked about in our racial equity committee. And I know Sydney is on here. She is a part of that group, but mainly the initial conversation was the need for more African American students represented in higher level classrooms, mainly AP and IB classes. And then some of the things students talked about was when we recruit Atherton Advantage, doing academy presentations, those things, is making sure that we have Black students visible so that even 8th graders coming in, I think Sydney said we need to start early. So start when those students are in 8th grade. And then as we go around to do scheduling, making sure that we have representation of all students so that the students that we're going to talk to can see that there are other Black students in the AP and IB classes. And from that, I will turn it back over to Ms. Marbles.
Yes, thank you so much. That was excellent. And it was a great summation of the beginning because as we delved deeper into the conversation, some of the things that the students brought up that were very important, such as addressing issues and concerns as things occur in the classroom. So for example, a student has stated sometimes they'll talk about a particular topic and a student who is not of African American color may say something inappropriate. So they may say something that's very inappropriate and needs to be addressed. They may use the N-word, or they may use another term that is a racial slur. And so students are very offended and they want to have that addressed immediately. They do not want to have that linger. And so sometimes students may say that it's not fully addressed at the moment, or maybe they're not even told why they shouldn't say that. So that was something that students had mentioned. They wanted to hear more historical and cultural references amongst the entire school and not just within the classroom. And so to hear more about African American culture within the entire building was emphasized, and that was something that students wanted to see more of. They also wanted to include more accurate information within the classroom context. So for example, one student said that they were talking about the North, and another student a teacher went very detailed in discussing that and what was going on at that time. But they would like to see that done in every class when it comes to accurate historical references to events that have occurred with updated information. Even if the text does not have it, they would like for the teacher to elaborate on it more and to have accurate information at the time that the information takes place. The students also mentioned they would like to address racial stigma stereotype training throughout the entire school building, not just for teachers, but for students. But in order to systemically change the entire culture and system, they would like to see a training that's going to address a lot of those issues. So what I feel from the, and I'm gonna let Ms. Campbell come over from there, from what they've been expressing to us, is that they want everyone to put more of the work in, to actually take the time to engage and understand culture, but also to be educated to express that culture towards our entire school population.
Okay. The next point was students wanting teachers to show appreciation for Black students' insight and not just contributions around issues when discussing race, but recognizing that a lot of the Black students have a lot of insight and things to offer, but they don't always feel like they're given that opportunity. back to what Ms. Marable said, they just want the teachers to commit to learning and putting in work to learn about microaggressions. And I won't go a lot into that but I think we informed the students that we were starting an all-staff book study to address that, and we'll have follow-up training. So that is something we're already working on as a school. Another example, and it's part of learning and being sensitive when things are said in class, but an example of a teacher referencing Black skin, and instead of saying melanin, said melatonin, and continued to repeat it and almost laughing it off, but never correcting what they said. And so when that comes from the teacher, it kind of gives the students in the class permission to also kind of make a joke about something like that. There was an issue mentioned of student-to-student behavior. So normalized use of the N-word among non-Black students, comments being made to Black students who are in higher level classes in a way that makes them feel like they don't belong in the class, and specifically that they should just take an honors class. Knowing when things that are said are hurtful, and again, I think that will go back to some of the discussions we're having with the all-staff book study. We talked about building a culture of respect for all races, ethnic groups, and religions. And a big part of that discussion was not just selling Atherton as a very diverse school, but in practice being a very diverse school where all students feel a sense of belonging. Our students were interested in having teachers be allies for them, and I think I'm going into your part, Ms. Marables. So I was on a roll, I'm sorry.
That's okay, no, that's fine. And actually that leads right in perfectly, because the students wanted to have teachers aware and cognizant of the needs. And so having teachers as allies and supports when we are addressing some of these issues were really something that they emphasized. They wanted that to happen as well. And so I think that would be important as we move further into this process of growth. And so personally, my suggestion was for them to attend the Aspire Higher meeting to get better understanding of what the needs are from the voice of students. I think that's important that teachers continue to hear those voices, the voice of a student. And so that was one of the suggestions I had made, and they seemed interested in that as well. And of course, we can still continue to brainstorm additional ways that they can support and be allies throughout the entire school, not just within the programs that I host. And I think Ms. Campbell was going to talk a little bit about the funding concerns that were mentioned.
Yes, and that when students talked about funding being more intentional, an example was the amount of money spent on the academies that have little participation from Black students. So we've had discussion on how to recruit more Black students to our academies, or to make them something they would want to participate in, bringing in community people who look like them, different things like that, and funding of resources. Students mentioned specifically honors classes, but also talked about overall just having more culturally relevant teaching materials. And that went back to something Ms. Marable said earlier about teachers not having to continue to rely on outdated whitewashed textbooks. And I know that's a conversation Ms. Chancellor has had a lot with the Racial Equity Committee. They feel like there are lots of up-to-date texts that present different perspectives that should be invested in for our teachers and students. And that's all I have.
And that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you all. Does anybody have questions for Ms. Campbell or Ms. Marables or input?
It's okay. I wanted to add a comment on one of the things that was brought up. I think it was Ms. Campbell, I don't remember, but the topic of culturally relevant teaching materials. This was something that, well, like Ms. Campbell and Ms. Marable said, I was a part of that meeting. One of the things that I think was really emphasized was the fact that a lot of times when the topic of race is ever brought up or there's ever like representation for Black students in classes, it's usually you know, in an English class or maybe sometimes in a social studies class, whether it's like Black authors or, you know, sometimes it's Black history, but you don't ever really get to see that same type of representation in other classes like mathematics or science classes and other things like that. And I know that sometimes it can feel like that's not necessarily connected, but I would argue that it really is, and that Black students need to feel that their community and that their people are represented in all of their subjects. So, for example, in a math class, I think it would be great if teachers could put a little bit more effort into pointing out the history of the Black community's contributions to mathematics and, you know, different cultures who have committed to the history of that. In science classes, you could bring up Black physicians, Black chemists, Black professionals in that field who, you know, have made a positive impact. I just think that those would be, I think that would be like a very big improvement to the representation that we see in those classes. Even in like a music class, I think it would be great if there would be more emphasis put into, you know, choosing pieces by Black musicians to be featured in the classes. I just think that there needs to be a more comprehensive effort, like in all subjects, to make sure that, you know, the information and the people that we're like presenting to our students is representative of our students and not just white people.
Thank you, Damon. As I look at the list of thoughts that were shared from the Aspire Higher group, it was I put it in the agenda there as well. I see things that are like cultural strategies, goals that we want to accomplish, and then there are academic goals that we want to accomplish in improving in addressing disproportionality and improving the experience of all students. Ms. Marables, you know, when I think culturally, I think it's important for us to think like, what are some things that we currently have as in an infrastructure to support the sense of belongingness among our students. So if I know not everyone here knows about the range of groups that you meet with, but if you wouldn't mind kind of like talking through some of the different groups, and I'm not trying to oversimplify, I just want to like approach this in many different ways.
The Aspire High program is for African American AP and IB students, and so it is to create a culture of inclusion where you don't feel isolated or alone as a African American student in the building taking those classes. But I would emphasize that kids want to have that in the classroom, that they want to have those same experiences in the classroom. But I just, you know, that is one of the programs. The other program is Men Equality. It is a all-male, predominantly at this point, African American entirety. It is through the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. So their primary mission is to address African American males. And so that program is for African American males. The Making a Difference is similar, dealing with the most at-risk students, but it is open to, all of my programs are open, just so you know, to all diversities. It's just typically the students who do gravitate and the students who really get the most out of the program tend to be African American students. The Phenomenal Women and Still I Rise programs are for females. It is a program where I bring in mentors. Both of those I bring in mentors, just so you know, from the community to enrich and to build the self-esteem and self-worth of students, but also to provide college career exposure. So all of those programs that I've mentioned so far, we do college career trips, exposure to college career speakers and things of that nature. And then trying to make sure I don't forget anything. Senior workshops, I do senior workshops open to all seniors. This year has been a little bit rougher than normal, but we have topics around growth and development for all speakers, all seniors regarding college and career. And please don't tell me if I forgot anybody. Did I forget anybody? Anybody? The more I think about all the programs I do. Oh, 4-H. 4-H is a new one this year. We have the 4-H finance and career that is for students to learn about finances as well as career development through Kentucky State University. They actually host those for me online. We do those, and those are awesome. I would love for more students to take advantage of those programs. K-State actually has mentors come in on the computer for the career portion, which is these college students. And 4-H Community Club. The Community Cares Club this year, a student of ours wanted to host a program to support the Latinx and African American community in service. And so we were able to facilitate that with Kentucky State University, and Jessica Marquez with 4-H actually runs that with me and Ms. Suarez. And so we're able to bring in a variety of opportunities for students. Of course, during a pandemic, we're all doing that online. Nothing is in person. And I hope I have not forgotten any program. I would hate to.
You have been working with a targeted group of juniors for ACT support.
Yes, the ACT supports. We have a professor, Dr. Fitzpatrick from Spalding, and he's awesome, guys. He has graciously volunteered his time to support our students in ACT preparation. And the kids are meeting really, the commitment is great. Let me just say that. When you have a small group of students who are continually meeting and have no problems with it, I think Dr. Fitzpatrick has a way with students. Let me just say that. So it's been a great opportunity, and Ms. Swanson's been very helpful with that group as well. But I would just emphasize, that although we are a school that has a large amount of opportunities for students to engage, I would emphasize that that students want to feel accepted throughout the entire facility. And so whether it is small or large, I want to help our students reach those goals of true inclusivity throughout the entire building. And I think that's really the thing I think my students are telling me the most, is that they want more opportunity, more reach, more inclusivity. And the more we can do to ensure that our students feel welcomed and engaged in all aspects of the building, I think that we'll see more than my programs. We'll see tons of opportunities for kids to get involved, where teachers are taking the lead and community individuals are coming in. And so just the more that we can do that and engage our students in that way, I think it'll be very impactful. Did y'all have any questions for me so far? I'm sorry, I talked a long time.
I'm sorry about that. I had dealing with a bank situation. I heard what you were saying, Ms. Marables, and I wanted to tie in a couple other things, like Ms. Chancellor. Ms. Chancellor has been facilitating our racial equity plan for the last few years. And then I also wanted to tie in Ms. Campbell. If you would you mentioned the book study. If you could talk just a little, just share both of you briefly a little bit about the book study that our staff's engaged in, as well as the book studies that you have facilitated or the counseling department has facilitated with students. So kind of talking about multiple layers of ways that we're approaching this, again, without oversimplifying, but being intentional in many ways.
I know we're both like, okay. So I've been, I guess, for the last 3 years, the counseling department has been doing book study groups with targeted students. It's kind of grown over the past couple years, with a couple of us having 2 or 3 book studies going. And basically, one of our goals when we started, we had Miss Ull and I, a group of boys who we knew were suffering from PTSD due to some things in the neighborhood. There was some loss, and they typically were not students who would just come sit in the counseling office and talk. And so we selected text, and through the small group book study, we were able to get to kind of deeper into some of their daily challenges with their friends in the neighborhood, even in school, and address issues that way in the context of a book. There were days when we would be in a small group and have a whole group of Black boys crying. Those were very difficult, but that was another way of reaching our students without having them come to the counseling office, because that just wasn't something they did. And we ended up expanding it and having groups with some of our Black girls who had reported the lowest sense of belonging in the school. And then we also had some combination groups with boys and girls. One of the groups, we actually read through the pandemic last year and into the summer. So it was another safe space where students could address real issues, but we did that through the context of book studies. Ms. Swanson also did one with students who were new to Atherton last school year, because she was also new, so she had that connection with them. And again, she was able to get to some of the issues they had as upperclassmen coming into a new school. We also, there were a group of teachers, and I see a couple of them on this call. We started a book study over the summer, I think, that started from Facebook. Several of us wanted to engage in the work in advance. And I woke up one morning and the teachers had put together a list. They invited other teachers, and we had a group of about 20 of our staff who engaged in a summer book study on their own time on how to be an anti-racist. And we had Ms. Chancellor, Ms. Beckley, we had assistant principals, teachers, counselors, and so that was work that was started prior to coming back to school, just so the teachers would be prepared to engage in conversations and support students. And Ms. Chancellor, I think that's a good place for me to stop talking.
Okay, hi, it's me again. Just in case anyone who doesn't know me wants to know why I'm qualified to talk about racial equity, looking at me. I'm finishing up my doctorate right now in culturally sustaining pedagogy, so I've devoted my entire career to racial equity and working through that. So that's kind of where my background comes from. Once we did the teacher book study, I reached out to that group and asked if anybody was interested in being on a racial equity committee, because in the past it's been, you know, I've done a lot of the work myself. So we started meeting and realized that what we were missing was student voice. So we reached out for student applicants, and we have a number of students that meet with us, some more frequently than others, but I love having their voice. And what we're doing right now is retweaking and rewriting our racial equity plan to make sure that we are looking at it through a lens of what the students find is important. And one thing with our racial equity plan that we've always made sure to have the focus on that other schools don't is we are looking on how do we support and help move our adults along, where a lot of schools, their racial equity plan focuses on what they're going to do to the students to help them do whatever it is they want them to do. So we realize that it's mostly adult behavior that needs to change in order to best support our students of color. So we've been doing that. Last session in my racial equity, we also had a student who shall remain nameless suggest that we should put together some modules like the suicide prevention that we do in anti-bullying training for racial equity and just working with microaggressions and things like that. So that's something we're going to tackle in the spring. And then also putting together a racial equity club where we can meet, where it's just a safe space for students to come and talk about topics. It may be an article, it may be a prompt, it may be whatever. We'll just have drop-in sessions where any student can come and just have a safe space that we can have these conversations. So having the kids there has been great because I love them and miss them, and just being able to talk with them and get their input just reinforces that I think that we are moving along the right continuum. But it's good to hear the kids because they're the ones that are impacted by the policies and decisions that we make.
I want to pause for an opportunity for any questions or comments, input at this point.
I have a question.
Sydney?
You said that the Chancellor, you said that the training will happen in the spring.
I think we're going to start developing it in the spring. There is no way we're going to be able to put it together. I think that'll be a good project for us to work about in the spring. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're supposed to have it done now, Sydney. You're supposed to do it over break and have it all ready for us in January.
And I can tell you, there's no from a leadership standpoint, it's there are many layers in doing this as right and as well as possible. And tomorrow morning, our just a second. Tomorrow morning, our staff will be engaged in the third week of a 6-week book study on So You Want to Talk About Race. And I'll tell you, just every week, it's awesome. I'm in the same group with Ms. Campbell and 10 other of our staff. And it's powerful to see the level of discussion and reflection and contemplation on what we can do as educators to improve our classroom and our school, and to be, I guess, and to improve our community and our world through this process, through understanding and looking at race and the power that we have to affect change and make a difference. So, there were a lot of things we've mentioned here, and it's I think it's going to take a very comprehensive collective approach at understanding where we are, where we want to be, and how we get there. Next month, what you'll see in this last bullet that was mentioned here really is one of the things that triggered me into many hours of research. And that was the perception of the value we place on the funding in our school. And where's our money going? Is it affecting things that are equitably impacting our students? And next month, poor Miss Beckley and Miss Chancellor have dealt with me all weekend long because I got so excited. I finally figured out how to run a report to analyze this data, and we're tracking it back over 3 years. We're looking at our academy enrollment as well as our AP and our IB enrollment as it's disaggregated by race, by gender, by race both African American male and female, as well as Hispanic, as well as our overall students of color. So it's been enlightening, and we're not finished with it yet, but it's been enlightening to see like what the data is telling us, and therefore like seeing what that attrition looks like from freshman and sophomore year to junior and senior year. Actually having numerical data to look at attrition, and therefore strategies and goals that would align to reducing those things that are disproportionately impacting our students and resulting in both the reality as well as a continued perception of differences in the reality of the differences of the experiences of our students. So, well, that'll be part of our analysis next month. I'll share that data with you ahead of time so that you have time to look at it and process it, as well as connect it with other things that we'll talk about that we're doing collectively as a school, and what we can learn from looking at historically what we've seen happening as well. Sorry, I think I rambled there a little bit much, but it's because I got excited about a new way that I could pull data that's allowing us to process it to address many of these very issues. And I'm going to pause there for just a minute, just to allow for questions, comments, processing. That's actually part 7A, as far as talking about our achievement gap and what we're going to be doing next month. But I'm going to pause there. Somebody was talking.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you weren't
No, it's good.
done.
Gavin?
One thing that I've realized throughout this conversation and sort of my experience at Atherton is that the microaggressions against the ethnically Asian population of Atherton is generally brushed under without little consideration. Because, right, I mean, I'm a Filipino American and I'm proud of my heritage, and I just feel specifically underrepresented throughout different media. Like in history, I feel like I never really hear about some positive view of Asians. It's always just sort of, oh, this nation got taken over. Oh well, it's just imperialist being imperialist. But I always feel like everybody's just like, oh well, that happens. And I just feel like even in my everyday life, there have been derogatory terms and phrases used against me just simply because I'm Asian. And I feel like even in this conversation, the Asian population just isn't being addressed fully or recognized.
Thank you, Gavin. And I don't want to oversimplify the impact of what Gavin said, but making sure we're being cognizant of that racism reaches beyond one demographic within our school and within our community. And the things that we are learning about microaggressions, about racism, about systemic structures that exist that disproportionately affect students and people in our society applies in applies in many ways. But thank you, Gavin. Seriously, thank you for mentioning that, because what it does, that it reminds me, and I'm sure it reminds all of us, that we're talking about something that has such a far-reaching impact on so many people. It seems weird to go ahead and move on to staffing report at this time. I wish we could have a better transition. We've spent a half hour on something that discussing as an SBDM on something that our staff have been investing in for months, and we will continue to invest in for the foreseeable future. And hopefully the indefinite future to come, as we recognize that not addressing it does not avoid it and only perpetuates it. So maybe if I, for the sake of trying to make a very awkward transition, when we deal with staffing, I'll tell you, diversity is something that is always under consideration, as well as how we can increase the diversity of our staff. When we're able to hire, when we're able to bring in our staff that are people of color, it helps increase the representation and the connection and the personal, the ability for us to have a staff that represents and reflects our student community as well. We currently are advertising for a Spanish teacher due to the resignation of one of our Spanish teachers, and that position posting will close at the end of this week, and we will look and see if there's a qualified quality applicant for that. We also have a records clerk position that just received response from our interview committee. I wasn't part of it. Ms. Uhl was part of the interview committee for our records clerk, and we are submitting the name of Darren. Give me just a second. Darren Douglas. Ms. Uhl, can you briefly describe Darren's background? Are you not hearing me?
Sure.
Yep, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Mr. Douglas is coming to us from another county in Kentucky. He has some previous experience in an alternative school where he performed a job that was very similar to the records clerk job. And he also has a background as a sports broadcaster. So of the applicants that we've interviewed, he was the most qualified for the job.
Great. Any questions? This will be our third or fourth records clerk in the last year. Is it 1, 2? This will be our third records clerk. So it's we hope to find some stability with that, and sometimes hiring outside the district helps because we don't have to deal with transfer issues, which we're currently dealing with our ECE implementation coach. We've submitted the name of a Richard Vaughn, but he's currently hired as a teacher in JCPS, and a procedure in JCPS is not to release a teacher, particularly a special ed teacher, from their position for a transfer within the district, because you basically take from one, you harm one school while helping another. So we hope to have an answer to that in the next few weeks. Hopefully in the next week, get an answer to that.
Which Spanish teacher resigned?
Miss McDonald.
Oh, okay.
Any questions about staffing? Then how about this? Let me bring some good news. I just met with Human Resources this morning to confirm, but we are currently, for lack of a more professional way of saying it, we're sitting on 2 vacancies of positions that we don't need to fill for the rest of the school year, and that we can cash in for funding. And those 2 positions are a teacher position, for which there was never a teacher put into that allocation because we received an increase in teacher funding at the beginning of the school year because our numbers are so high. And then the other position was the counseling office clerk, where we hired that person into another position in our school, and we never filled that position during NTI. So we are in the position to be able to sell those back and bring us a total of, give me just a minute and I will share screen that, because when I send it in, I have to have your all's endorsement. Give me just that. There we go. Here, I'm going to share screen real quick. Let's see. Doug, I see your face. Can you give me a thumbs up? Do you see the staffing change? Okay. And I'll try to make this larger somehow. Hope that's legible now. So the way it works within JCPS, when you have a teacher position that you're not using, or if you were to buy one, it costs you what the district average is. When you're dealing with a $2 billion organization, they don't care that much about small differences in teacher salaries. So they take the average and say, that's how we process it. So we can cash in a $66,100 for this vacant teacher position. We can cash in $22,560 for the vacant clerk position, for a total of $88,660. And we would need to put that code into this particular funding code, 011327, which deals with teacher overages. The reason for that is we received extra staffing allocations because we have more kids. In this NTI environment, there wasn't really a place to be hiring new teachers, nor in a in-person environment, there's not a place to put the physical bodies anymore. We're well beyond maximum capacity. Our school capacity is 1,400 and we're currently pushing 1,500. Therefore, what we do is we cash in this position and then use that money to pay the teacher overages. Those teacher overages, if you'll look on the agenda, you'll see that I'm going to keep a running total from now on. We're running about 23,000 total that we have to pay back to the district, and it will likely reach about 80,000, 80 to 100,000 by the time the end of the school year comes. So that money will go to offset that. I'll pause there because most everyone who's heard me give this speech before knows I love to talk money and love to talk staffing. But if there's a question about how that works, nobody's losing their job, nobody's being forced out, nobody's not having a position next year that we were otherwise funding this year. No personnel are connected with this. We do plan on filling the guidance office clerk position for next school year, just not for the remainder of this school year.
Principal Averly, I'm a total rookie here. Can you just give us a real quick thumbnail sketch of what that overage is again? I don't understand. Why do we pay the district money?
Oh, gotcha. All right. So here's my thumbnails. It is, so Miss Flusher will say, Miss Flusher, she has 6 classes she teaches, right? She has a teacher load of 150. that means her average class size is 150 divided by 6, or 25. If I were to put 30 in every one of these classes, she'd have 30 times 6, which is 180 students, which is 30 more than her teacher load. So in that situation, and we do have a few teachers in that kind of situation, what we do is we pay them an extra allocation to cover that increase in students above their contractual obligation. Now, there's also a situation, very small, because we're able to manage these numbers well, but a few teachers may have a couple more students than 31, which is a class cap. So we may have 33 students sitting in like right now, I think we have 33 sitting in an art class, an art 3 class it's not enough students to break it into 2 sections, but it is enough to keep one and that teacher's working, like even if we return in person, when we return in person, would be able to work with those 33. But because of that, we have to pay what's called overage, over and above what their contractual maximum would be. So it's money well spent, because if I were to try to go buy teachers to fill those English, math, science, social studies, and art and all that kind of stuff, you're talking $66,100 per teacher that it would be costing us.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Anything else on the staffing change? Can I get a motion and second to approve that we keep this money? If we don't keep it, then it stays with the district as vacancies. I'm guessing you don't want to do that. Motion. Second.
Seconded.
Consensus or further discussion on this? Good to go? Awesome. Motion seconded. On reports 5C or 7C, it's financial priorities. That's where you see where I put in the total accumulated teacher overages for this school year. Now, 23,000 to me doesn't sound like a lot. In fact, I had an hour-long discussion with my payroll person and our person who manages our Munis accounts to make sure that number was right. The reason it's not as, I thought it would be double that. The reason it's not as high yet is because the school year started later, and because of the window for teacher overages to be, or teacher loads to be balanced, we didn't actually start paying overages until late September, which means they didn't go on to payroll until mid-October. So this is actually only reflecting 2 months of overages. So we're looking at about 10,000 per month in teacher overages. December, January, February, March, April, May. So we're talking about $60,000 more dollars on top of this that will accrue. And that's not going to be reflected in the XF balance that you see. The way they do that, because of the magnitude within our district of the staffing, those numbers accrue separately as a negative balance that I have access to. Then at the end of the year, when they roll money over to the next school year, they'll pull whatever extra money you have to pay off that negative balance. So it's not free money out there, and it's not hidden. It's just not part of our XF budget reports that I send out to you all. So at the end of the year, what I don't want to do is we spend ourselves down to zero, then we roll over to the next year and we're at 100,000 in the hole, right? That's where you get yourself in trouble. Did I explain that kind of okay? So from now on, under Part C, I will keep that negative, that balance that will continue to get larger negative, but today you approved money to cover what I predict to be about all of that. Cool, then I'll talk about building modifications. Let's see, I mentioned at our last meeting, and I'll continue to mention it until we get a financial number for it. We received over $1 million through the district and through the Community Foundation of Louisville, the Academies of Louisville, renovations for our school. part of that renovation that I want to extend with our school money is the renovation of room 118. It's one of our science teachers who's teaching a majority of academy connected classes now. I'd like to gut that room to the studs the way we did in the classroom directly across the hallway from it, a mirror classroom. I want to do the same thing. We gut it to the studs. We put new lights, new paint, new floor, and some new equipment in there. It'll probably run, and I don't know, but I'm just guessing from what I've seen happen. It'll probably run anywhere in the range of $30,000, give or take 10, to do that renovation. So when we reach that point, I would come before you all and say, we've gotten the approval, we've gotten the prediction. This is how much it'll cost. This is how much money we have left for this school year. And we'll decide whether or not we can afford to do that. We've already talked about in the past the sink and eye wash for room 115. That's actually the eye wash got denied. I won't bother explaining why. It has to do with chemistry lab requirements and stuff. But the sink was approved. It's going to run a couple $1,000s. So that'll be an expenditure that we already have money allocated for. Painting room 128 is one of the academy rooms that were renovated. They never painted the wall because it has a glazed ceramic tile block in it, and you have to use special electrostatic painting the same way you would paint our metal lockers. That has been approved, and we're putting in a building, we're putting in bids to find out, we're putting out feelers to meet with the people who do that work to find out how much it'll cost us. I'm guessing it'll cost us several thousands to get that room painted. We have money allocated for that purpose. Lighting in the band, orchestra, and choir room is something that's just needed in a facility this age, going on 60 years old. It's got horrible lighting in those areas. It's going to be a significant cost. When I say significant, I'm guessing in the $10,000 to $20,000 range. Once it's approved and once we know a cost, that's when I come before you all and say, here's what it costs, here's what we have. Are you all good with that? I've put in a building mod and I've got no response on it yet on bottle filler stations. I've had this request, from several staff and many students saying, especially in this health and safety concern when students do return, is just being able to go in with a bottle and fill up your own water bottle rather than sticking your mouth near a spigot and touching something. It'd be all automatic. So I've identified 5 locations for bottle fillers, both in the gyms, the concourse, the main hall, and in the classroom hallways. And I'm hoping to get approval for that. Painting the concrete floors in the engineering suite. And then the big one that's coming up right now is security cameras. We actually discussed and approved this last year. Then COVID hit and no action was taken. They never took our money, but we'd already discussed and approved the installation of security cameras. Well, since then, the cost has gone up 30% because of the cost of the work and installation right now. So it went from about a $7,000 project to a $10,000 project. We already have that money had that money in a code for that purpose. It was never taken. They asked for the verification of the code, and the code they used was a slightly different one. So I didn't go over our budget report, the line item budget report that I provided in the as an attachment and in the agenda, but you'll see in one of the very first things there is I'll tell you what it is. So in this budget report that I attached in the agenda, the very first page on the second line is an $11,000 balance. Well, that was $1,000 last month. The only thing we did was move on the third line. which is technology-related hardware, they wanted that moved up to a different code. So we moved it from the third line to the second line. And the reason I did that, again, anything over $2,000, we discussed. We'd actually already discussed this last year, and I knew that I was meeting with you all. We just did this earlier this week, and I knew I was meeting with you all, so I wanted to be able to just mention it, and I didn't want anything to slow down on that security camera installation. But I will pause there if there's any questions about funding or questions about anything I've discussed.
Dr. Abreu, can you remind us of where these ones are going? I can't remember anymore.
The cameras? In a few different locations in our hallways and one exterior. A couple stairwells, and then just like outside the library, things like that. And if you shoot me an email, I can dig up the map for you, Ms. Lucier. I'll share it with you. Yeah, okay. We all good? All right, since we are out of respect for time, we have 17 minutes. If we can go ahead and move to Mascot update. I was reluctant about putting this in here because I didn't want it to be perceived as an SBDM responsibility, but I do feel like it's my responsibility to keep you all informed from a leadership body and in the realm of influence you have to communicate with people. So what I did in meeting with various student groups, staff groups, our alumni, I reached out to our district to find out if there's a PR or a consulting firm that our district works with or that they would recommend on how to guide this work. And they said, hey, hold on, Dr. Aberle, we think we're going to have a district policy or procedure behind this. I'll get right back with you. Weeks later, I got back with them and they said, sorry, just it didn't gain any traction. So you're good to do whatever you want. Michael, thanks a lot. I guess that's good. It can be good and it can be not so good sometimes when you're given that kind of authority. So what I'll be honest with you, I don't want to be the one spearheading all this, but I want to be very strategic about it. That's why I wanted a consulting firm or a PR firm. Then I reached out to our Alumni Association because we actually have some people that's been their life's job is PR, marketing, consulting, directing, that kind of stuff. And they are excited about helping facilitate this process in a way where we'll bring in some staff, we'll bring in some students, we'll bring in some alumni, we'll use that as a target group, we'll survey our students, our staff, and our alumni, use that information to process it, bring it before different groups, including you all, on, here's where we're at, here's what we're thinking, here's kind of the validating the process behind it before ultimately deciding on a process for moving forward on either a recommendation or next steps from there. So even just this morning, I was talking with one of he was actually the former president of our Alumni Association. He used to do, for lack of my own way of describing it, the best way I can describe it, he was the PR and marketing person for the Galt House. And he's already reached out to several other people who specialize in this, who are Atherton alum. We're ready to kind of brainstorm over this winter break on how to bring in student and staff representation and move forward cautiously, but soon, and getting this thing going. So I'll pause there if there's any questions on that part. Okay. NTI return to school, NTI update, status of return to school plan. I'm on old business 8B. I don't know if that's really old business. I put it in there. The real answer is I don't really know what the return to school plan is. We'll be ready. We have some draft ideas. We have, I mean, if I'm asked, yes, we have a plan that is as good as it can be right now. It will depend on when we actually return, what the vaccination status looks like when we return, on what that plan will actually be in the way of structure of the school day, in the way of whether students are returning partially, like 50% half the week, 50% the other half, or whether based on vaccines, they're going to tell us that we are 100% capacity from day one. I honestly don't know. That's not being discussed right now, at least not at my level. I'm just a lowly little principal who's in a school. And so, you know, I follow through when I'm told to be ready with when decisions are made at a higher level than me. Right now, I can tell you that what I would like to share is that listening to the news about what's happening across the state does not necessarily apply within JCPS because we are a much larger district than any other district in the state. We have much larger number of students, of buses, of transportation, of food. We have much larger needs for personal protective device, for disinfecting equipment and disinfecting solutions. And so the magnitude of what we deal with is so much greater that it just, if you hear things in the news and you think, well, mid-January schools are going to be returning, I can tell you that's not anything that I've heard for JCPS. We are talking about a hopeful return before spring break, and even as possibly as early as mid to late March. Now that's nothing in solid. That's not anything that I didn't read in the news as much as you could have. So I don't have any insider scoop outside of what projecting it in a way of return to school that we are doing is done with that type of time frame in mind.
Dr. Eberle?
Yes.
JCPS is having a meeting about the COVID response tonight at 6.
If that's what the news says, then that's probably what's happening.
I'm looking at the JCPS release. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
And JCPS apparently just said that we won't be back until at least mid-February. That's at 3/21, but that doesn't mean anything other than we're not going to be back before mid-February.
Right. So that's probably their way of being making sure everyone's informed. And also, like, I've already kind of had to stave off some, are we returning January 4th? Are we returning January 15th? No. You know, slow down. Yeah. So. All right, if you don't mind, let me skip the policy review, just because I think it's going to take longer than we have time to do. And this is an item that can remain as something we can continue to address. Under that policy review, I hyperlinked the district examples of 602 and 603, as well as something we discussed at our last meeting where I'm like, I really don't know what that is. And it was the JCPS selection of materials document. So that's provided there. But I wanted to give you an update on the status of our application for a revised alternative council model. Our 4 students who were invited here are here by special invitation by me and by us. I think it's important for us. I did not want to wait until January, March, May, next August, I don't know, for KDE to get back with us on our application, but because we are requesting to have a different model to SBDM where we have 4 student representatives, we are required to submit that to KDE. I don't see any reason why they would stop that, but from a formality standpoint, our students are our special guests as opposed to our student representatives until we can formally say that. So I hyperlinked the actual application that went to KDE. It's in the agenda. And I guess what we can do is at least review what would be my proposal as the revision to our bylaws under membership. And that's what I provided in the agenda there. And that is a 3-paragraph statement rather than having what we've had, and that was a 1-paragraph statement in every one of our agendas. I'd like to formalize that when we have KDE approval, formalize that in the way of a revised bylaw regarding membership that includes our student representatives on council. And if you're reading that now, I don't know if I need to share screen or if you all have got access to the agenda, but I wanted us to formally state that these representatives were the presidents of the sophomore, junior, senior class and the Black Student Union, or their other officer designee if they were unable to fulfill that duty for that year. So it's not like kind of a Monday on September you go and on October I go, but it's one person that, so we have consistency in over the duration, but also I wanted to make sure that we were specific about who they were, because in the past it was a fairly arbitrary process. And then I mentioned this last month. I'm going to mention it again. You know, I have a son in this school. Several of our staff have children in the school. Obviously, our parents do. I just think it would be very awkward to have and potentially put us in challenging situations if the children of SBDM members were also SBDM members. So I'm open to that discussion, but I just think in dealing with several parent child situations that I can think of in the past, I feel like this would intercede on potential issues that we would face, uncomfortable issues we would face in the future. So I don't know how you all feel about that, but I'll throw that out as my continued concern. Does nobody feel like I think we talked about it a little bit last time, so maybe it's ran its course, but
I mean, Tom, I don't have a kid at Atherton, so I wouldn't have feel that, but I can see why that would be a good idea to not have that. You know, like to have it separate. Does that make sense? I agree with that.
I think it's just more important we talk about it now while we're not actually dealing with that situation, so
Right.
that's not so personal. Mr. Reinhardt, you can say something.
I mean, I would agree. It would be inappropriate. I mean, I think that would be the default. It would be inappropriate to have a student who's related to somebody else on the council, whatever that relationship might be. I mean, if for no other reason, appearances of propriety would definitely have to be respected. And I think you're right. It would open up a can of worms that I don't think anybody would want to deal with.
Okay, well, I'll keep this on there. Thank you both. I'll keep this on there purely from just like I do with facility kind of updates and stuff, purely as this is what we keep, so we all remember what we've talked about. I don't want it to disappear for 6 months and all of a sudden, you know, it's a kind of a surprise, but we don't necessarily have to talk about it. We don't every time. I just wanted to have it there to be ready to go, that as soon as we get KDE approval, we can go through a 1-2 reading on it in back-to-back scheduled meetings and get that approved and into our bylaws. And that'll be the way that Atherton SBDM works now and into the future until a future SBDM were to change it. which I think is pretty awesome. All right. Is there, since we have a few, just since we're closing here, we're tabling the policy review until next time, just due to time constraints. I think it was worth investing more time into the discussions that we've had today. Is there anything you want to have on next month's agenda that would be appropriate for our council to be addressing? I don't normally ask that question because it's, I kind of imply it all the time. If a parent reaches out to you about something that's an SBDM issue and you want that as part of an agenda topic, all you need to do is email me. And as long as it's within SBDM authority, it can get on there. But I'm gonna go ahead and just throw that out there if there's anything to be thinking about. I want to let you know the administrators are talking about it a lot. Miss Beckley and Miss Ull and Miss Swanson all know that we've been spending hours and talking about how this semester is going to end and the SBDM policies and how we're responding to students to provide supports for students in so many different ways. But I want to let you know that if there's anything that we're going to do that would be a deviance from the SBDM policy, I'd be coming before you for us to talk about it and talk about the impact of that and why there would be a change or why we're requesting this change in policy. But I think that's important to note, not because I don't want you, it's because I want you to trust me and because I've seen how sometimes principals can go renegade on you. And I've been in multiple school districts, 3 school districts, and sometimes I've seen how SBDMs don't work well. And they usually don't work well because people don't trust one another. And I want you to trust the leadership, but you trust us because we will try to be as transparent as we possibly can and be honest about the situations we're dealing with within the authority that we're given. So awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. I'll hang back. It is 4 o'clock. Actually, I shouldn't hang back because it's an SBDM meeting. We'll go ahead and officially stop the recording, and this concludes our meeting. It's 3:59 p.m. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Staff, see you tomorrow morning. Book studies.